Hello, hello, everybody. Hi. I'm assuming it's been a great morning, afternoon. I see familiar faces. The one thing I love about the startup community is that we are family. We all have similar challenges, we all have similar dreams, but at the end of the day, it's about succeeding. And we're here as an ecosystem to help each other share ideas. We want money, we want to make money, we want to contribute towards our various countries. We want to ensure that we have an enabling environment where as startups we're able to take our space and places at the right tables, but not to take, but to also provide. Because at the end of the day, being a startup is about finding solutions to problems and making money whilst you're at it and enjoying it for most of us. I hope you do enjoy the money that you make. So without further ado, the topic of discussion today is Startup Act. Is it ever going to happen? It's a very interesting question because in my mind is the revolution has already started. It is happening on the continent. Each and every day or every other day you hear about a Startup Act in Nigeria, a Startup Act bill in Kenya. South Africa has a Startup Act movement because in South Africa, the legislation exists, but it's how do we define it, or how do we refine it, or how do we make sure that it's something that actually does work for startups? Because we are not startups that are going to build bakeries and it ends there. Nothing wrong with that. We are startups that are wanting to grow, that are wanting to scale, that are wanting to be globally relevant because we are finding global solutions. However, are our African countries creating enabling environments for that? And that is why we then have startups. So could we just put the panel? I'm going to call upon my panelists. We have Murandi Mafumo. Could you come up to the stage? Murende. We have Muzi Mshali. Could you come up to the stage? Muzi. You know, I know Muzi from a long time. Like, it's so lovely to actually introduce him as somebody who's playing a role in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And then lastly, sorry, can I have the screen up? All right, our third panelist, if you could come up, please. That's Adoyele Agunoki. Sorry for pronouncing your, I probably botched it, but you'll reintroduce yourself properly. I'm so excited. Thank you, such a gentleman. So I have three wonderful panelists that I am going to give them an opportunity to tell us who they are and the organizations that they represent, and also what solutions are they providing in the ecosystem. So if in a very, very brief way, could you, in essence, introduce yourself and tell us what role do you play in helping startups or being startups yourselves?
Okay.
We'll start with the lady.
All right. I'll go first. My name is Ayodele Ogunoiki, and I work for Goodwell Investments. I'm an investment associate at Goodwell, and Goodwell is a VC firm focused on social impact. So we provide funding to startups focused on serving the underserved. And our ticket sizes range from $500,000 to $5 million. And one of our criteria is that you're post-revenue and also just, again, providing solutions to the underserved. And that's it.
Great. And then also if you could tell us, are you a Pan-African organization? Are you
yes.
from Nigeria?
Okay.
Yeah.
I am from Nigeria, and Goodwell is a Pan-African organization. I work for the Cape Town office. We focus on SADC, and we have a hub in East Africa, in Nairobi, focusing on East Africa, and we have an office in Nigeria focusing on West Africa. So whenever we're assessing startups, you know, if your vision is to scale across the continent, we're able to support you, and we're very hands-on in our approach of, supporting startups.
Great. Can I call you Ayo, if you don't mind?
Yes, you may.
Ayodele, thank you so much, and welcome to the panel. Muzi.
Yes, my name is Muziwe Mshali, and I'm the CEO of Entrepreneuri Africa. The company originally founded in Norway, and what we're here to do is basically enable the entrepreneurship ecosystem, right, for both the entrepreneur and the enablers. We've been around since 2016, and right now we're changing gears to really, really disrupt what really is going on here, and I'm happy to be part of this discussion.
Thank you, Muzi.
Hi. Hello, mic check. Hi everyone, my name is Marendeni. I am from a startup called Kusini Water. We're a social enterprise working to increase access to safe drinking water throughout the African continent. So at this current stage, we operate at the moment in 9 provinces plus Lesotho. We're scaling to the rest of the African continent this year. What else? Yeah, my background is in science. I know nothing about startups, even though I'm a CEO of a startup. So I'm just looking forward to seeing how a startup that is trying to scale can help in this conversation around regulation, deregulation. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you so much. So clearly we have a great representation of the ecosystem. So you've got the startup who has no idea what a Startup Act is, right? Because at the end of the day, he wants to make money, he wants to solve problems, and he wants to grow his business and probably scale. And then we have Muzi, who in essence is all about how do we give the necessary tools, the guidance for small businesses to actually start their businesses. So they're there to guide and to shepherd. And then we have Ayo, who in essence also they're there to fund in these ideas. So it's a great representation of an ecosystem. But I think the important word is that it's an ecosystem. It all exists within one environment. And we have different players in the ecosystem, and it also includes the government, right? The ones that are supposed to be creating policies, enabling policies. So a little bit about myself, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I wear many, many hats. One of them is I am also a technology startup. I also do invest in technology businesses, well, one in particular. And so I understand what it means to not have funding. I understand what it means not to have access to a market. I understand what it means to have to deal with the necessary red tape of actually wanting to create jobs and contributing towards the economy. So the third hat that I would say I wear is somebody who's been pushing for policy reform in South Africa, because I understand the challenges. So what we started a few years back in 2020, in fact at an Africa Arena conference, was, is South Africa going to have a Startup Act? Because Tunisia has just established a Startup Act, and as a country, it's now starting to reap the benefits of having an enabling environment, because it comes from the top, where now the government is invested in ensuring that we understand who you are. You're not a small idea that just started yesterday. You actually invest in research and development. You're looking for investors who are going to empower your ideas. You're looking to access to a market. And also you want to scale. You want to exchange your intellectual property, not just in your country. You want to actually do it globally. But is your country creating an environment where it's safe for you to start and grow and scale, where it's safe for investors to come in, to invest in you, because it's easy to get your access to your intellectual property, for investors who are looking for incentives. So there are various components of an ecosystem, but it has to make it easy for you as a startup to really, really thrive. So the question on this panel is it ever going to happen? The reality is it is already happening. As somebody who's part of the Startup Act movement in South Africa. But the question that I have for my panelists is, what have been your biggest challenges as people that are either helping entrepreneurs, funding entrepreneurs, or being entrepreneurs yourselves? And a follow-up question to that is, a Startup Act, what would you require for it to have? Because we don't want to be running around saying we need a Startup Act. Is what exactly do you want it to do? How would it help you in your mission and vision every morning when you wake up? So I'll kind of throw it to my panelists and answer it in any direction. But I think it's important to understand, what is it that you want a Startup Act to have, and what are your current challenges as investors, as ecosystem supporters, and also as startups?
Okay, so I think there are many different angles to it. Firstly, thinking that a Startup Act is a good first base for all the ecosystem players to kind of be heard, especially by the government. And what I would like to see is a framework that creates an enabling environment, an inclusive environment. So if someone thinks that they have something that's innovative and is going to grow at a high scale and is going to make a big difference, they should have the comfort that they can put their all in the idea without maybe worrying about the financial risk, or maybe having like a safe living environment. And in order for that to happen, they need support. So just thinking about the different startup acts that have been in place, kind of giving founders like a stipend for a year to just support them beyond whatever they're innovating. The second aspect, I'm thinking about investors, making it easier for us to fundraise and kind of invest in this asset class that is very new to Africa. So there are a lot of regulations and maybe barriers to maybe dispersing funds or receiving funds across the continent. So reviewing that and trying to assess, okay, what's the quickest way for us to do this safely would be a good starting point. And I guess the third part, which was spoken about today, is consumer protection. So as much as we love these great ideas, is it going to create an environment that's safe for the consumers? How is it going to play out in the next 10 years? And the current risks that we have, are we sure that the mitigants that we provide wouldn't stifle innovation whilst thinking about consumers? So those are the three things I have in mind.
Thank you, Ayo. That's great insights.
Well, I mean, in the last 5 years, we've worked with organizations or entrepreneurs at different stages of their cycle, and we find that there's like this missing link between incubation and moving them into acceleration. I think we might be faced with the real problem of not having enough startups to accelerate if we don't make sure that we create an ecosystem that is connected, right? So you've got different programs that are operating in silos. You've got different departments in government that are operating in silos. You've got startups that are moving from one incubation or acceleration to another.
Serial startups.
Yeah, that becomes a business model in itself, right? So I think for me, the one thing that stands out is that we need to just sit down, draw the map. What does it all look like? How do we all connect it together? The entrepreneur, the enablers, government, and private sector, the large corporates. Because if we don't do that, we're spending a lot of money. I mean, by law, 2 to 3% of your net profit going to this sort of, developing startups is going to waste if we don't use it properly. So we really need to just talk, sit down, and make sure it's harmonized and we're not duplicating and money is not falling through the cracks. It could be used more efficiently.
Wow, Muzi, you figured it all out here, because in essence it is about that. I mean, we have serial entrepreneurs that are jumping in from one incubator to one incubator. It doesn't help what we are advocating for, because in essence, do you have a business or are you in the business of being a serial incubatee?
Yeah.
That's a serious challenge. And I think also, Ayo, the whole notion of make it a safe environment to invest, but also, I mean, with Web 3.0 that's coming, there's a lot that's not tested, that's a lot that's not known, but there's a lot of investments in there. 10 years from now, where will it be? So we also have to ensure that the companies that are being invested in are going to be companies that will stand the test of time. And I think, Murendi, if you could share your challenges as a startup, right? I think it's probably a long laundry list, but also just talk to the challenges that you will experience as a startup. I mean, you didn't do this because it's easy, right? Because you wouldn't be here if it was easy. You did this because you know it's challenging, but the rewards are also quite large. You could scale up, you could shoot up. I mean, I see a company like Ayoko, a company like Sweep South. These are our peers that we used to, like Muzi, drink, dance with, have fun with. But now they're like global entrepreneurs. And by the way, Muzi is a DJ, if you're looking for a great DJ for a party. That's his other life. But these are peers that had lives before us, but now they're shooting the lights out of the world. But Murendi, I think as an entrepreneur, you will have challenges. But what are challenges that are unique to the environment in which you exist in? And what would you wish for it to change? Because we are speaking about an enabling environment through the Startup Act movement.
Yeah. Depends on how much time we've got. My list will take about 3 to 4 hours. So
we have all the time.
Okay, perfect. Right, so I just sort of tried to draft down some of the major challenges, primarily in the context of what we're talking about. So one great example is the Cuban engineers. So I don't know how many of you guys know that last year we got some amazing engineers from Cuba to come in and solve our water problems. We, as Kusini Water, this morning, just now when I was standing there at the back, I almost screamed out loud. We were granted a patent, right, for water treatment technology. The patent was granted this morning. It was applied from...
Yay!
I mean, obviously, we applied for it in 2018. The interesting thing about it is that government gave us the money to apply for that patent. So government essentially, I mean, on a theoretical level, should know what we're doing, right? They should sort of know to some extent what we're doing because they gave us the money. Department of Science and Innovation gave us the money to build the technology that we're building and to get some patents going. But there is a lack of cohesion or cooperation between the Department of Science and Innovation, the Department of Water and Sanitation, the Department of Trade and Industry, all these departments that should work as an ecosystem to build our economy are not necessarily connected. Because if they were, we've worked in the past with the Department of Small Business. The first van we ever bought was bought by the Department of Small Businesses, right? And then when COVID hit, the Department of Small Business was collecting database of what businesses did. What I thought that was going to be interesting was that they can use this database to plug to see who's doing what, right? In the water space, so they asked us, what do you do? So I write what we do in the water space, what the department has helped us with. That was not used for anything. That was just a database that was used for nothing. So what should happen is that we should try and cut off some of those communication gaps or some of those red tapes that exist in how the data is collected from a startup point of view to how that data is used both in application for solving government's problems. Because our technology, if you wanted to, could solve some of government's problems with water. We're building technology that allows for municipalities, not municipalities at the moment because we don't work with municipalities, that can be used to allow municipalities to deliver more water cheaper because our technology is low pressure, so using less electricity, giving water to communities. But because we don't necessarily have that great cohesion within the government, we are more inclined to work with private sector and use this technology to grow our own organization. This could actually be used to solve and not South African government paying 50 million rands for Cuban engineers, because we're here. But they know that we're here. So why is it that we're not communicating? Why is it that that data that is there and existing is actually not being used to solve the problem? Because we can't solve the problem. A few years ago, I remember seeing this tweet from Elon Musk who said to the Australian government, hey, Australian government, give us 3 weeks, we'll solve your electricity problem. We had the same thing. We can, hey, South African government, give us 2 years and we can solve the big water problems that we have in order to bridge the gap, right? So we can use some of our technology to solve some of the big problems that exist. But there is no cohesion. Second thing, when it comes to the Startup Act itself, last year and this year, we're going to pay more tax, enough tax to pay for 3 or 4 people's salaries in the organization. Why? Why not give me some sort of incentive to employ more people so that in 5 to 10 years' time, when I'm a billion-rand company, I'll pay more taxes? Why do you want to take 24% or 28% right now? That money would have been enough to fund 2 or 3 jobs. We employ 19 people in the organization. Actually, we could have been employing 23 people, but some of that money we did what? We're paying taxes with it. So to me, I feel like there could be an incentive for tax, especially for a company that could potentially create jobs. So much of the startups that are here this morning can create so many jobs. Why are we not creating incentive to allow those companies to create jobs, to grow a lot faster? In 10 years' time, or in 5 years' time, we're a billion-rand company, then we're paying a couple hundred millions, right? Third thing, impact. One of the most interesting things was that 3 or 4 years ago when we started talking about how can government incentivize social impact and allowing for organizations such as ours to get access to funding as a social enterprise. So at the moment, there is no such thing as a social enterprise from a government standpoint. So you have to register both as a PTY Ltd and as an NPC, non-profit company. Those are 2 different entities. So you then end up having to run 2 different organizations. It could actually work out better if you recognize a B Corp, a social enterprise, as a social enterprise, allowing it to create social impact, generate the revenue, and then create the jobs, right? I think there is a little bit of a lack of cohesion, and I think it would be great if the Startup Act can talk a lot to how do you incentivize social impact, how do you incentivize growth from a tax point of view, and allow for enterprises to directly be able to use that technology to solve the problems that exist in this country. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does. Can we give him, actually all the panelists, a hand of applause? You guys have done very well in answering these questions, and I think our audience can relate a lot to your challenges. But also, what I like is that you're not just coming up with challenges, you're coming up with solutions and recommendations. And what I would like to say is that the Startup Act is your friend. The Startup Act movement is a platform where we share ideas, we share concerns, but then as an ecosystem, we come up with ideas and we are a collective voice. Because imagine how many challenges everybody has for their respective. But as long as we can agree as across the board, these are the overarching challenges, incentives, tax reform, our ability to be able to attract this funding, our ability to be able to have at least 3-5 years of actually starting your company before you are taxed. So the Startup Act movement is your friend, and it is your voice because we want you to be part of it. That's why, like I said, I always say I'm just an ordinary South African that wants to grow a business, but instead of just sitting on the fence and complaining about taxes and everything else, I said, let me put my hand up and let me be part of this movement so that my voice is heard and my voice is out there engaging with the relevant people. The good news is South Africa is finding its feet. You know, yes, it's taking a bit of a while. You know, countries like Nigeria, and I'll get to you, Ayo, because Nigeria is doing phenomenally well in attracting investments, you know, growing unicorns. So I'll kind of tap into what it is that they're doing because, you know, Nigeria, Lagos is one of my favorite cities in the world. Forget about Africa. It's chaos. I love the energy. It's chaotic because of its energy. But somehow it's able to find itself globally. It's representing itself globally. It's attracting necessary investment. So there's something that they're doing right. But you know, for our fellow South Africans, we are not anywhere far from that. We really aren't. I mean, I'm not going to be sitting here licking my wounds and saying, oh, poor South Africa. It's like, no. South Africa has gone miles and miles. I mean, in 2014 at Simodisa, which is a non-profit organization, we wrote 7 clear recommendations for how do we reform an environment for high-impact, high-growth startups, right? So these are technology, innovation-driven startups that are creating and creating solutions, investing in research and development, and they are designed to scale. But here are the various components of policy that must be changed. So we were able to clearly outline that because the people that did it were South Africans that are patriotic, but had to find themselves going to places like Silicon Valley to be able to grow their companies globally. Peter de Villiers is our chairperson, and Peter de Villiers is the founder of Clickatel, which is a global business, recently raised $91 million, not rands. So it's a lot of money, and its valuation has skyrocketed. So he and myself and a few interested South Africans came together and said, how are we going to build an enabling environment for people like us to grow and thrive? And so, you know, we've been able to see how the policy has reformed. And I was very excited during this year, during the State of the Nation address, when one of the recommendations we had clearly outlined around attracting talent, the president was able to say, yes, South Africa has a business visa, but now we're introducing a startup visa and a remote working visa. So that is, for us, progress, as slow as it is, because we put this down in 2014, now it's 2022. It's a long-term journey, but as South Africa, we know that we might not have time. So that's why some of these things, and luckily now the president does have the attention of the Startup Act movement. And it's something that if we come together as a collective, we are not sitting on the fence and throwing stones and complaining, because either ways, whether there is policy or non-policy, if you are a world-class entrepreneur, you will make it. You'll find a way. But it's good to make sure that your children's children have a great foundation. So that's why you have to play an active part and be part of organizations like, you know, joining the coalition of the Startup Act movement, because that is you. That is what you want, and you are the voice that has to speak to the government. So, Ayo, Nigeria is doing amazing. You know, it's a very interesting environment, and it's been able to attract a lot of global unicorns. You know, when you hear this company has raised its, chances are the founder is Nigerian. Mm-hmm. What is it that they're doing well? And I know they're also progressing their Startup Act bill or their Startup bill. What is it that you guys are getting right?
I would say the first advantage Nigeria has is its population and diaspora. So the fact that there are a lot of Nigerians outside of Nigeria plays a big factor in that. And the networks that people have built from childhood, translates into the Nigerians in diaspora, and then, they kind of promote what's done at home. So I would say that's like the one advantage. I wouldn't say that Nigeria has created a policy environment that's comfortable for investors. It is still a very high-risk country. The value of the currency has depreciated over the past few years. But in the sense of it being a chaotic environment, people are challenged to think of new ways to approach things and make life more comfortable for themselves. So the typical government approach, or how the government is viewed, is, they're there, but not necessarily enabling directly. I know you've probably read in the past few years, I think it was actually in 2020 or 2019 when people were using Bitcoin to fund the End SARS movement, and suddenly the central bank decided to ban all accounts related to cryptocurrency and any crypto-founded company. So when you think about a government that's, directing policy in that way, and not maybe thinking, okay, let's invite the individuals and the founders who created this company and found a new way to support remittances or transactions outside of the traditional greenback and maybe banking licenses. It's a difficult dance. But yes, they've made progress with the Startup Act. They've drafted the bill. It's been submitted to the president, and he's meant to present it to the Senate sometime this year. They claim to have had conversations with people in the ecosystem, but when you look at the committees they formed, who's sitting on it, there are like 2 people from the startup ecosystem that will be represented, and every other person there is from the ministry, the Minister of Finance, the President, and basically heads of ministries. And when you look at our politicians, they're much older than the population they're governing, and there's a very big knowledge gap in the sense of looking at the innovations with eyes of fear and rather of like understanding and trying to see, okay, how can we benefit from this? I think the traction from foreign investors is definitely making them rethink the space and maybe making them more open into, okay, how can we capitalize and capture the earnings that probably are escaping us right now because we don't have any grip on the market. So forward-looking, I think they need to do more in the sense of being proactive rather than reactionary, ensuring that when they do have forums to, entertain people, they have the right players in the room. That would also help them bridge their knowledge gap. And when this policy is eventually passed, by the Senate, will they actually implement it? Would it just be another thing that was drafted and it's just going to sit there? It wouldn't make any difference. It would just be like going from point A to point A, yeah.
Ayo, thank you so much. So I'm not going to be selfish and hog the stage. I'm going to give our audience an opportunity to ask questions. There's one question there. Let me take the first 3. There's another one there, the third one. Going once, going twice. Okay, let's start with the gentleman at the back.
Hi guys, amazing conversation. So I just want to kind of speak more to one of the points brought up. So I'm a startup. 2018 I pitched at GovTech conference and I'm one of the winners. I'm promised that as a winner, my idea will be implemented in government through State's Information and Technology Agency. So naturally excited and super happy because, wow, I've just pitched for the first time and DevTouch is about to now take off. 5 years later, my fellow alumni, Africa Arena alumni, is sitting on the panel while I'm actually having to restart my business and pivot, you know. Problem that I found is that 2019, I pitched to a big corporate, MTN, and super excited, exceptionally excited, because we're making exceptional progress. Within a year, MTN is interested. Still again, 5 years later, not off the ground as yet, but MTN is now actually become my competitor. Because now they've taken my idea that I've pitched to their procurement panel, and what their procurement panel doing is now is they sourcing a solution that they can MTN arise. So the reason I mention this is the Startup Act, over the last 2 days I've heard a lot that it is focused a lot on the globality of us as startups, which is really fantastic. But back home, we are still kind of being looked at by the vultures as the easy prey to solve problems that they ideally would have, and the startup gets nothing out of it because they've got the money, they've got the market share, they've got everything else. So essentially, how do we get this addressed as well through the Startup Act?
That's a very good question, and the simple answer is join the movement, because that's where we get to hear your concerns, your challenges, and you also get to be in environments where you can actually say, corporates have a huge responsibility to work better with startups and protect them. And if there has to be a social compact between corporates, the government, and startups, that's what we need to work towards. But you can't be on the outside. I'm inviting you in and say, be part of the movement, be part of me, who is just also a startup that wants to see progress. I want access to markets so that I have access to funding, I have access, right? And that's why I'm sitting here and I'm playing my part, and I'm inviting you as a fellow startup and say, be part of the movement so that your concerns are heard and you can push for something like a social compact, which does exist. And then also you have a channel of voicing your challenges and say, MTN, I am calling you out. You know, so as a startup community, we need to come together and work together, because with you going there by yourself, it's going to be difficult, versus if you go in there with a whole community behind you, because they actually agree and can attest and can actually understand where you're coming from. So simple answer to that is join the movement. So I'm hoping that the guys there in the tech can put the Startup Act website so people can join the movement. All right, I had another question there.
My name is Abdou. I'm leading a research project about entrepreneurship in Africa that is supported by Carnegie Mellon and Sciences Po Paris. I had a question on the point that was raised by Ayodele about the diaspora and the importance of the diaspora in the success of the ecosystem in Nigeria. Actually, I was wondering what makes really the difference between a lot of people that have origins from a country that are living abroad and the real diaspora. Because when I look at countries like Algeria or Congo, for example, you have a lot of people from there that live abroad. Some have their careers and stuff, and they are successful abroad, but they do not constitute a real diaspora and have no direct impact on the ecosystem in their country of origin. So I was wondering, and maybe in your point of view, but also also asking the question to everyone, what makes a real diaspora, and what are the key levers that can help constitute this kind of these people a real strength toward the ecosystem back in the country of origin?
I think that's your question.
Okay, I'll do my best to answer with very limited knowledge. But I think that, so you mentioned two countries, you mentioned Algeria and DRC. I would say, as much as they're English-speaking countries, English is a second language. So that's also, language is also kind of like a barrier that's unspoken of. And in the sense of support for, of how like the Nigerian diaspora works to support home, where you find most Nigerians are in the West or East, so like Europe and the Americas. And these are countries that tend to lead the trends of like global movements. So having an exposure to like the trends and what is to come, and then translating that back home or going home and saying, okay, I was just in the States and I was able to tap to pay. Why don't I have this at home? And then just coming up like your friends or something and just saying, okay, I saw this, it worked there. Why did it work there? And how can we make it work there? There are always like those conversations ongoing. They're very high touch points of like trying to bridge what they've seen with what is going on at home. And another thing is there tends to be a very strong community of if outer is not going to support inner, let's try and make it happen ourselves first. And it's not an easy thing to get to. A lot of people get burned along the way. I'm not going to say it's like a pretty perfect story, but that's typically the nature of things. It's like I have something, or we have something to prove for ourselves. Mainly, firstly, again, the reputation of Nigerians across the world is not a great one. So it's always like I need to prove people wrong to be heard, and that's another driving force for things. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ayo. I think we had a last question. Gentlemen, yes, you? It'll be a last question, and then my panelists should just think of their parting shots over and above encouraging everybody to join the movement.
Okay. Hi, it's Temiso Zwane here, Go-Getter Limited. What it is that I wanted to ask basically in relation to the Startup Act is more along the lines of, is there a framework in place that ensures that a startup is successfully defined so that the bigger corporates don't, or not necessarily bigger corporates, but there are no cowboys that are going to exploit the legislation in time to come. So like if there's a tax benefit that's attached to you being a startup, is there a mechanism in place that successfully defines what a startup is and not what we around this room actually think or know of what a startup is?
That's a very good question. I don't know if somebody wants to take it, but I mean, Muzi?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very good question. And, and what I foresee happening with the Cowboys is setting up 100 startups in order to get that tax break, right? That's what you're referring to in the most part. Look, the reality is there will always be someone who tries to bend the rule or find a loophole in a rule, right? But I think the most important starting point is to actually create this framework, right? And we don't know how this is going to pan out once it's enacted. I actually think that the Startup Act is going to happen. But once it happens, there's a world of learning that is yet to come as well. So I would suggest we don't take a too cautious of an approach. Our situation is dire. I think we need to take risks. Our leadership is old and running out of ideas. Let's join the Startup Act movement and post those questions there and rabble-rouse, Caution, there's no space for caution anymore. I think we've gone past that stage long ago. We have to take risks. And we'll find out if it works. And if it doesn't, because of this big movement and the big numbers, can we affect changes at a faster pace than how it's been going on? I mean, Mati spoke about something like they started in 2014 and it only is happening now. That can't be acceptable anymore. I mean, to her point, the diaspora. I'm running a project with the Cardano community, Project Catalyst, blockchain-based, and I'm doing the 6th cohort right now. And in every cohort, there were Ghanaians and Nigerians, right? And they were not based in Nigeria, right? But because of that, seeing the experiences in the countries that they live in, the transfer of knowledge is almost, it happens much quicker. And the solutions are actually aimed at the Nigerian market, but using blockchain and so on. So in these networks that we create, find out what's going on in the Startup Act in Tunisia, for example. What are the learnings that we can take in there? I think we've got power in numbers. Join this movement but certainly my summarizing point is say, let's no longer be cautious anymore. Let's just risk it.
Can I add to that?
Yeah. So it will be a closing remark as well.
So to answer the question that you had on like the definition, I agree that joining the movement is a helpful way to voice what you think, should be the definition. But based on the white paper that's currently published, it's if you've reached a revenue of 100 million rand, and then you no longer kind of fall into that cohort of what is considered a startup. But yeah, I think I agree with everyone. Take a look at it and maybe share your own thoughts and notes on the entire policy. Yeah.
Randy, your parting shots?
Yeah, I'd say also, for the guys that are in the over 100 million rand revenue, I think also part of this should involve trickle down as well, like how it happens a lot in the States, where the guys that are in the 100 million bracket are coming down and helping the guys in the 10, 5, 2 million bracket as well. I'd say then the movement can be a lot bigger as well in a couple of levels, because I think mentorship for me also is quite a big thing as well in what we're trying to do. As someone who comes from purely a scientific background and not a business background, someone that has already done it can trickle down their finances and also their knowledge as well. Bringing those on board as well will be very, very helpful as well. So yeah, I'm excited to join the movement as well.
Great. Wonderful. So just can we give our panelists a hand of applause? They've been phenomenal. In a very short space of time, we've been very honest with ourselves. But then I think the one thing that comes out is you have to be part of the solution. There's no longer time to ask a lot of questions, but join the movement. Be part of something that's moving forward. And we are the future of this country. That's the reality. I liked what Muzi said. It was very blunt in saying that our leadership is old and running out of ideas. We are the future of this country. We have to create the solutions and have the ideas. But how are we going to do it if we're folding our hands and not doing something? The good thing is that in 2014, we wrote recommendations for high-impact, high-growth technology startups. 2021, we had a conversation with the president. He said, great, South Africa needs to be a startup nation. I like the Startup Act idea. In 2022, during the State of the Nation address, they started talking to some of the refinements, introducing some of the components of having a Startup Act. So we have started. But we will not be able to do it if you guys are not part of the solution and the voices, because we all have problems, but let's find solutions together through an avenue which is very clear. So I'm going to leave it on that. And then for a further conversation around Pan-African Startup Acts, we're having a panel discussion tomorrow. Tunisia will be on the panel. The founder, actually, of the Tunisian Startup Act, Newman, will be on the panel. Somebody from Kenya, somebody from Nigeria, and somebody from South Africa talking about Pan-African Startup Acts. So if you want all the information, it is on the Startup Act. It's all on all social media platforms and also on our website. So join the movement, and thanking you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Yes, love you.
Thank you so very much. Can we turn for a photo? Can we turn? This was a fantastic panel discussion.
Ladies in
Oh
the
yes,
middle,
yes,
yeah.
yes, absolutely.